Agenda forum. Tonight I'd just like to make the acknowledgement of country. The City of Swan acknowledges the traditional custodians of this region, the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and their continuing connection to the land, waters and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present and their descendants. We welcome everyone in the gallery tonight. Thank you for coming tonight to listen and watch, and those at home that are watching. The disclaimer is the terms and conditions of entry into this meeting are posted at the entry of the public gallery, and members of the public are advised to read them prior to attending this meeting and abide by them. Tonight we have two apologies, Councillor Prodovnik and Councillor Singh. Everyone else in the chamber is present. And tonight we have, are there any declarations of financial proximity or interest affecting impartiality from councillors? If there are, just make sure that you fill out the form that's under the drawer under your desk. We also have Mr. Kane, the CEO, declared an impartiality interest in item 14.3.2, proposed scheme amendment number 214, as his son is employed by Planning Solutions. If you do have any others, please hand them up to the front here. So tonight we have one petition to be brought up and presented by Raylene Pacello. Is Raylene here tonight? Hi Raylene, have you got your petition there you'd like to hand up to staff? Sorry? Should come up to the podium, and you can just turn that on and then read out your petition.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. We, the undersigned, all being electors of the City of Swan, request the Council to investigate why the RISE network, comprising of 3 lots at 41A Great Northern Highway and 12 and 14 Leslie Road, Middle Swan, are parking 20 to 40 vehicles on the road and verges of Leslie Road, when according to their development approval, they have a sufficient car park to accommodate all 3 lots. The reason for the request is that residents are concerned that RISE Networks parking is insufficient for their current operations. Daily, up to 40 cars connected to RISE are causing unsafe parking behaviour and road usage, and the diminished line of sight, traffic congestion and vehicle manoeuvring restriction is hazardous to residents accessing their properties and to the pedestrians that must walk along the road. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that will be tabled at the ordinary meeting of council next Wednesday evening, and we're just going to hand that up to Mr. Russell. Thank you. And we've got some reports and notices of motion, which we have nil. Some deputations this evening at 6.2 in accordance with the current procedures for public participation at agenda forums. All requests for in-person deputations were required by 5 p.m. on Tuesday the 7th of November 2023, and all written deputations received by 3 p.m. on Tuesday the 7th of November 2023 were circulated with the preliminary agenda on Tuesday evening. So tonight we've got 14.3.1 Industry Extractive, Lot 201, number 165 Reen Road, Gidgegannup. In-person deputations, we have Sally Block on behalf of GPA, not in support of the office recommendation. You have 2 minutes there, Sally, to present your deputation.
Right. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Sally Block, representing the Gidgegannup Progress Association, and we object to the advice to approve this item conditionally. Our reasons for doing so are: Lot 201, number 165, Reen Road, Gidgegannup is zoned landscape under the City of Swan planning scheme. Extractive industries are not a permitted use on this property unless the City of Swan gives specific approval. We don't think the specific approval should be given, and that such a use is contrary to the objectives of the Gidgegannup Rural Strategy, which was workshopped by the community, and those objectives reflect the expectations of the community. Those objectives, as set out in the Rural Strategy, are to conserve biodiversity and ecological systems and recognise as a significant metropolitan asset that must be prevented from a gradual erosion of ecological values and landscape nature, to provide regional ecological linkages, to conserve landscape character and visual amenity through retention of natural topography, remnant vegetation, location and design of buildings and types of land uses, to minimise risks to life and property, to provide for low-impact land uses and development, such as agriculture, tourism and recreational activities that are compatible with environmental and landscape values. The 200 or so owners of landscape zoned properties have complied with these objectives and have had to ensure that watercourses and vegetation should be fenced off and protected. They also had to provide management plans if they propose to have livestock on such properties. It now appears that should this proposal be approved, that a precedent is going to be set for any owner of landscape zoned land to put forward a proposal for an extractive industry on their property. Goodbye to any environmental protection that has been built up over the years. The retention of watercourses and vegetation in good condition are a hugely attractive element of the hills, an attraction to visitors, and should remain protected by this landscape zoning.
You just
And
have
management
1 minute
response-
left. Thanks, Sally.
Was that it? 1 more minute? Okay. To maintain the ambience of the area. Reading through the development application, there are many points that are extremely vague. I have noted these in the document already circulated. It is not what is put in such an application, but what is not written down, and this application certainly needs to be rewritten to have any credibility. This vagueness is reflected by the planners in their handling of the points made by the proponent. Little concern is demonstrated on the protection of flora and fauna on the property, respect for the neighbours, ambience, the fact that we have a resource area already, and do we have to scrabble around on a property such as this to extract a bit more rock? Very little specific information is given on what is permitted in the hours between 7:30 and 4:30. A lot of truck movement, work, noise are outside these hours. From this proposal and the city planner's acceptance, it needs to go ahead to the detriment of planning policies,
I'm
neighbours,
so
flora
sorry,
and fauna.
Sally. Thank you. That was the 3 minute mark. And I know you've got a lot to say, and I thank
I've
you
only
very
got
much.
but 2 more bits.
2 more bits.
Can I
Give us
just...
an extension? We can't. Not at a council meeting, sorry. Not at an agenda briefing.
I should have spoken quicker.
Does the meeting procedures local law apply at this meeting? Yes. Well, therefore, I would like to move that Sally is allowed to be given 2 more minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to finish?
Okay. From this proposal and the city planner's acceptance that it needs to go ahead to the detriment of planning policies, neighbours, flora and fauna damage, we have to be extremely concerned as to how our environment is going to be conserved for the future. It would be a good idea for councillors to visit the site before coming to any decision. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Sally. Our next speaker is Joanne and Leslie Ormsby, not in support of the officer's recommendation. I'm sure is Joanne here.
Questions? I'd like to
Any
ask a question.
questions?
Thank you.
Just one moment, Joanne. I'll just get Sally to come back for a moment. I think Councillor Catalano has a question.
Yes.
Thank you. Could you tell me what has been happening at the block to date? Because I note that this is it's an application, a retrospective application. So can you tell me what's been happening to date?
Well, rock has been taken out, and rock has been taken out and taken off the property. There's been a lot of tipping of rocks onto trucks, which is extremely noisy. Basically, the business has been going on, and it only stopped when complaints were made to the city, and Councillor Henderson and Councillors Nizino came up, and I believe Mr. Russell did from the planning department, and then work was stopped.
And another question. Has there been any excavation of the actual site itself for rocks or whatever that they want to get there? Like, have the fire breaks been excavated? Has any of the cleared land been excavated to date?
The fire breaks, some of them have been excavated, rocks have been taken out, I believe they've been taken to another destination where they've been processed. Really, it's been business as usual.
Any other questions? Councillor Howlett? Oh, sorry, just come back for just a moment, Sally. I've just got... Sorry. Oh, sorry. This is a question for staff. So are there any other questions before Sally goes from any other councillors? No? So you'll start your question to staff? We can. Yeah. It's easier after. Do you want to do it? Okay. Thanks, Sally. So I've got Joanne and Leslie Ormsby not in support of the officer's recommendation. Thanks, Joanne. You've got 3 minutes, but I'll give you a warning at the 2 minute mark if that's all right.
Mine will be fairly short and sweet. Okay. Good evening, Lady Mayor, councillors and general public. We live down the hill from where the excavation site is to be. The noise obviously has stopped, but my big concern is once you disturb land, and especially the fairly rocky terrain, that is all, you get a good downpour and that will all end up in the creek down below. And the excavation with the trees, roots grow under that firebreak area. So you're going to lose trees in the near future if that continues. We moved up to we've lived in Gidgee for quite some time, and obviously bought our block because it was a landscape block. If anybody goes along 2J Road, you can see the dirt and dust on the 2J Road where the trucks have been coming out. And you can imagine what that will be like on a small road like Breen Road. Also granting permission for a quarry, an excavation of rocks. It just sets a precedent. You can, if you've given one person the go-ahead, how can you stop anybody else? That is the end of my short and sweet submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Joanne from councillors? No. Okay, thanks very much, Joanne. The next deputation we have is Aaron True from ABM Landscaping Pty Ltd in support of the officer recommendation. Is Andrew here tonight? Hey, Andrew. Aaron.
Okay.
Aaron, I'll give you 3 minutes and I'll just give you a quick warning at the 2 minute mark, all right?
Yeah, no worries, thank you. Good evening, Mayor and councillors. My name's Aaron True and I wish to speak in support of the City's approval for planning application Industry Extractive 201 on 165 Reen Road, Gidgegannup. I note the objections received by the City and I would like to draw attention to the following key points on the application. First of all, environmental impacts. The remnant bush areas on the property will not be cleared. The Department of Biodiversity, Conservation and Attractions, DBCA, outlined that provided the management measurements outlined in the environmental assessment report by Katerra Environment are undertaken and no vegetation clearing outside of the existing firebreaks occur, the DBCA have no further comments to make. Fauna management measures will be undertaken should fauna be located in the subject area. The Department of Water and Environment Regulation, DEWA, noted that the clearing of any vegetation regrowth within the existing firebreaks on the land is likely to be exempt from requiring approval pursuant to the Environment Protection Act 1986. In light of the above, the proposed extractive operations at the site will not have an adverse impact on the native flora and fauna. Impact on wetlands watercourses. The environmental assessment report also outlined there are no geomorphic wetlands located on or near the site. Furthermore, the impact of the proposed extractive operations on the existing creek at the site can be managed through a drainage management plan to detain drainage and mitigate against the transport of sediments. A drainage management plan will be prepared and implemented. Amenity impacts. Noise. The acoustic assessment prepared by Herring Storer Acoustics considered the level of noise generated by machinery and operations on the nearest potential noise sensitive premises. The acoustic assessment concluded that the noise generated from all proposed plant, vehicles and operations can comply within the requirements of the Environmental Protection Regulations 1997 with the proposed operations subject times Subject to certain management measures, we can confirm that the management measures will be implemented to reduce the level of noise generated on surrounding properties.
You have 1 minute, Aaron.
Thank you. The dust management plan prepared by Kateria Environment identifies a number of management actions to mitigate dust, which will be implemented. These include available water cart, installation of maintenance, screenage, vegetation limited to spread of dust of site, sealing of the main driveway to eliminate dust generated from the transport of all sites, trucks transporting materials to have tarps, speed limits of 30 k's an hour, ongoing visual assessment of dust generated during the proposals. All of these management actions will be undertaken to reduce the amount of dust that is generated. Bushfire risk. A bushfire management plan has been prepared by Bushfire Planning in support of the application. The Department of Fire and Emergency Services outlined the risk of bushfire proposed, substantially mitigated by the application limiting extractive operations to the period from May to the end of October outside of bushfire seasons. Furthermore, the extraction operations within the fire breaks will be managed such that the fire breaks...
Thank you, Aaron. That's the 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
I move an extension of 1 minute.
Seconder? Councillor Howlett?
Okay, thank you. In summary, given the limited scale and time duration involved with the proposed excavation activities we intend to undertake at our property and the numerous management measures that will be implemented to mitigate any potential environment and amenity impacts, we firmly support the recommendation put forward by the City, and we trust that the Council share this view and ultimately provide a favourable determination. Thank you very much for your time and consideration of these points.
Thank you, Aaron. I'll just get you to wait there just a moment. I think we've got some questions from councillors for you. So, Councillor Howlett, you were first.
Thank you, Aaron. As this is a retrospective application, can I ask how long ABN Landscaping have been operating extractive industry from this site?
So we actually started in about 2019 on Mr. Best's property, the property next door. And in answer to some of the earlier questions, very minimal rock has actually been taken out of our property. We actually have, I went to the Gidgee Progress Association a couple of months ago and invited people to actually come and have a look, and no one's taken us up on that offer to come and have a look. I can quite clearly prove that the majority of the rock that we have actually taken is from our neighbour, who's probably the biggest person who's complaining about it. So we actually haven't, on our property, very limited amount of rock has actually been taken from our property. So what was done in the past before we were aware that we had to actually get this approval done.
That was my next question, was why haven't you applied or sought an application prior to commencing the extractive industry?
Quite simply, we didn't know. So, look, I grew up in the hills. I grew up in Gidgegannup, and we used to rock pick. And we started our business. We struggled to get the supply of rock. We do buy a lot of rock, what we can buy from Catalanas. We bought a lot from Catalanas in the past and other suppliers, but we have struggled through COVID to get product. But it just simply started up. The farmers plough their paddocks and they push their rock into piles, and we just literally started a long time ago just taking rock out of the paddocks. And the minute we start on one farmer's paddock, then everybody asks us to clean up their paddocks, which we did at Mr. Best's place. We simply just started that way, and then we got asked to take more rock out to rip Mr. Best's paddocks, which we did. And then when we decided, and we bought our property and we moved on to our property, and then we decided that we'd like to improve our property, and the fire breaks are really bad on our property. That's when things changed, and then it was reported that we're doing the right thing, so then we actually stopped. So we haven't done any work on our property for a year and a half. We from time to time still go into our property, but we're contracted to the City of Swan. We've done the bushfire clean-up up there for the last 2 years. We made our property available to use the City of Swan through the bushfire clean-up. So the majority of work that we've done is related to our work. I've extended the invitation to councillors and to the Progress Association, anybody who wants to come up and actually see what our property is. It's a beautiful property. It's 80% bush. We have no interest. We bought it. We're not farmers. We don't want to be farmers. We love the bush. We both grew up in the hills. My wife grew up in the hills. We love the animals. We're not interested at all. But our property is very steep and very rocky. And to be quite honest, you wouldn't want to live there in the case of a fire. We have the monastery next to us, which is a beautiful property that's 450 acres. And then to the west, we have another large property, and to the south. And it would be hard to fight a fire in there.
Thanks. So am I to take from that for the last 18 months you haven't been doing any extractive industry?
Absolutely not.
And you've submitted the application 18 months ago, is that, or when was that submitted?
It's been about 18 months. Yeah, it's been about 18 months since we started speaking to council about what we had to do and to how to get it. It's been a big task to get it to
Thank
here
you.
to this
Thanks,
point.
Aaron.
Okay, I think Councillor Bowman had a question, and then Councillor Catalano.
Thank you. The Contera report's got 2 pictures of the on-site dust management actions. Are they actually of your property?
Sorry. Yes. Yep. Yes. Yep.
Second question is, how many tonne of rock do you crush in a day?
How much could we crush? We could probably 2 truckloads a day.
So what's that?
20 tonne, something like that.
So my understanding is in the report, the expected output of rock is 5,000 tonnes per annum. Is that correct?
Yep.
And in the report, it talks about you'll crush rock 3 days once every 2 years.
Yeah. So all it is that so we do rock pitching. So we don't make gravel. Essentially, what we do is rock pitching. So a lot of Gidgegannup has our rock pitching. 2J Road, Reserve Road, Reen Road. Recently, City of Swan Stock Road. That we did the work there as well. We do rock pitching. So to be honest, the rocks are about football size rock. We break the rock into the size that we can use it. It's very hard to find the right size, but the time that we'll be limited to actually being able to take the rock out, like obviously with fire dangers and that, it's only certain times of the year we'll actually be able to take the rock out.
So you're only going to crush for 3 days every 2 years.
Sorry, I didn't explain that. Sorry. So the byproduct that we don't use, just the smaller rock, we get a campaign where we get a crusher in for 3 days and we just crush that smaller stuff into gravel. We've done that once before. Probably about 2/5 of what we actually crushed actually went to our neighbour's place to do his subdivision. Very minimal of that gravel has actually been taken off the property. Your near maps will show that, and the rest of it's still on the property, which we intend to use on the fire breaks when we rip the rock out.
Okay, so if I get it right, so the expected output of rock, 5,000 tonnes, most of them are going to be football size,
Yep.
But some of it you'll crush right down, and you'll only do that.
Only the byproduct,
And how much would be the byproduct of that
I think
5,000 tonne?
I think last time we did 4,000 tonne, and like I said, we still have over half of that on the property. And that's just gravel. That's just laterite.
So 4,000 tonnes of byproduct,
Yes.
but you can only crush 2 truckloads a day, which is what, 40 tonne.
Yep.
So you're only going to be crushing 120
Oh, sorry.
tonnes in.
Getting confused here. The crushing into the laterite, the byproduct, is a really quick process. That's why it only takes 3 days. I think it took 4 or 5 days. To be honest, the last time we did the campaign, most of that, I'd say 80-90% of that rock actually was the byproduct of the previous 2 years on working on Mr. Best's property.
Okay. What's the width of the historical fire breaks?
3 metres, but Mr. Best's brother Rex, who we bought the property off, hadn't really done a lot of work on them for quite some time, so some of them are quite overgrown.
So is your intention to do it from the existing fire breaks?
Yes.
And or the historical fire breaks as well?
The existing fire breaks.
So just the existing, not the historical?
They're one and the same. There's some fire breaks that are in the middle, but only whatever's marked on the plan is all we're going to be doing.
So the the historical fire breaks that have got regrowth on them.
Yes. Yes, some of those are marked. Yes. But when I say that the regrowth is some parrot bush and that, like it's basically pure rock with some parrot bush growing through it.
Okay, and I've got questions of staff afterwards, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Catalano had a question.
Yes, thanks. You probably don't have, or you might not have seen a copy of the report that we've got, but I'll just draw councillors' attention to page 40. It says that the excavation involves the historical fire breaks and cleared areas to be ripped by the 14-tonne excavator.
40,
So,
yeah.
what cleared areas are we talking about?
They're just the fire breaks.
So, it's not cleared areas then?
The cleared paddocks. Yeah. So the cleared paddocks.
Cleared paddocks
The paddocks that are already there. Yeah.
are going to be ripped as well? Yeah?
No, that's just the storage. No, it's just the fire breaks.
Oh, okay.
It's on the plan. It actually clearly shows where we're interested in doing it.
Oh, well, that's just what was in the report from Row Group.
It's not. We're not ripping any paddocks. We don't need to rip any paddocks.
Okay.
We only need to rip what's marked, what's highlighted
and
on
the other thing I
plan.
want to ask you is, when you talk about ripping, what do you actually mean?
You just have the 40-tonne excavator and it has a pick, and we bought the machine 18 months ago. Hence why we haven't done any work there. We just rip the rock out, and then from there we move it down to the laydown area. So it's a long way. When we worked on Mr. Best's property, the laydown area that he was happy for us to have was 150 metres from his house. For 2 years, he was happy to have us there doing that.
No, I'm talking about your
now,
proposal here.
so our laydown area is 850 metres from his house.
Okay.
So we take the rock from the fire breaks and we move it to the laydown area, which is a long way from anybody, and we break it there.
All right. And those fire breaks, what kind of depth is that going to be ripped to?
Only anywhere from a couple of 100 millimetres to a metre max.
Metre.
Yeah. And it's only because the fire breaks are quite steep.
Okay. And what's those areas going to be used for later on? I mean, once you've ripped them and
Just fire breaks.
excavated them.
So the monastery has really good fire breaks. Ours aren't that good. We'd like to build a house there one day, but to be quite honest, we wouldn't have our family there now. Just wouldn't be safe enough. The fire breaks, I really would like. I have asked multiple people to come out and see. I've tried to answer everything, but it's just if you were to come and see the fire breaks, there wouldn't be an argument.
One final question. I noticed that you've got a creek at the bottom of the property, or it's in the middle and it flows through the middle of the property.
Yeah.
So I imagine you've got some pretty steep hills.
Yeah, we do, yeah.
That you're going to be. So how the hell are you going to stop water from eroding down through those excavated areas?
So historically, the creek is only a winter creek. It really doesn't flow very much at all. Our dam is spring fed. To be quite honest, the dam is fairly low. I don't know whether the water table
No, I meant the water coming
Yes.
off the top of the hill.
Yes, so
going
historically
down
there's
excavated
there is contours already in the paddocks that are there. There's not many paddocks on our property, but there are already contours there, and the water actually diverts around the areas, the laydown area and our dam. So our dam doesn't actually collect any water from the paddocks, and it is all diverted around by the existing contours that were built many years ago. So there will be no water that will go to our laydown area. It all diverts around it.
Okay. Are there any final questions, Councillor Catalano? I've got a question still for you further from Deputy Mayor from Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my question, Aaron, is you may have answered this already, but I'd like you to tell me again, what is the purpose of extracting from these fire breaks?
Quite simply, yes, like I said, we do rock pitching. I know it might sound strange, but it's actually quite hard to get the right size rock. So we do buy quite a lot of rock from wherever we can, from Bindoon and from out Flynn Road in Mundaring. But the supply has been really hard to get. But not only that, like we've also bought from Catalanas, to be quite blunt, like if we order rock, we get rock this big that we can't use, and all of our guys have to physically pick the rock up. So we break the rock down. The fire breaks have to be done. There's no our fire breaks have to be done. When we're allowed to do our fire breaks, we basically, in order to have our house there, we'll have to rip the rock, and essentially we'll rip all that rock out and put it in a pile and leave it there like every other farmer does, and it'll just sit there and decay for years and years. It'll be quite costly to do those fire breaks. We can mitigate some of those costs by being able to break the rock down and use it within our landscaping business.
So is the purpose to create broken down rock for sale, or is it to improve the fire breaks?
Well, our end game is to build a house on the property. So yeah, we would like to improve the fire breaks. Yes.
Okay. Now, just another question. My understanding is that fire breaks normally go around the perimeter.
Yes.
Of a property. So being familiar with driving around them myself as a volunteer firefighter, have you got fire breaks around the perimeter?
Yes, we have. Some of the areas on the northwestern side, there's a lot of granite in there, and it's a big part of the bush area. It's too steep there. The fire breaks don't go, but there is an internal fire break that cuts off that corner. It is a large property, and it's 130 acres, so there are some internal fire breaks. Just probably, I would assume that they were built to help fight fires. We have had the volunteer fire brigade in. We paid them last year to come in and do one controlled burn, and they're going to be doing controlled burns over the next. They think it'll be 6 to 7 years before they just want to do controlled burns on certain sections, but it is a large chunk of bush to set alight. One whole big chunk of bush would be quite a big task.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions from councillors before we ask for staff questions? Councillor Knight.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Aaron, there's a 5 year. You're looking to do this for 5 years. Is that from 2019, or would it go from
starting now?
Starting now. Okay.
Yeah,
thank
but
you.
we really haven't ripped very much rock at all. To be honest, what rock we have ripped is when we bought the excavator, and to be quite honest, the excavator, we realised it needed a fair bit of work, so we ripped a fair bit of rock just to see what it was capable of doing, and that was about the same time that we found out that we needed to do the extraction licence. So there was like I said, if you look on near maps, or if you come and have a look at the property, you'll see that there's very little rock being taken from the property.
A question from Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. Aaron, the request is for a 5-year licence.
Yes.
Generally, that's the period for extractive licences.
Yes.
Do you see a need beyond that?
I wouldn't think so. To be quite honest, it's hard to quantify some of these things. I know I've been pulled up, and that's one of the things that the Progress Association pulled us up on. I know we've said 5,000 tonne, but it could be 2,000 tonne. Like, it's not, obviously we can't be more than 5,000 tonne, but once we've done the fire breaks, we've done the fire breaks. Like, we have no more need to do anything else, and we certainly don't plan on going against anything that the council have put forward that we have to do. So it could be a lot less, and I would assume that we would get it done well and truly within that 5 years. Like I said, though, there is extended periods that we won't be able to actually rip any rock.
All right. Any other councillor questions? We had some questions for staff. Councillor Howlett, you had some questions for staff?
Thank you, Mayor. I have just sent mine through by email to staff, so I'll await an answer from them. Thank you.
Councillor Bowman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Am I correct? It's a retrospective approval, because the recommendation doesn't mention retrospective approval.
Through Madam Mayor, the application is retrospective, but we're not couching it as a recommendation to say that we have retrospectively approved all the works that have been done prior up to date. So there's a distinction there. We're only looking at a retrospective application, and we're approving it from this point on as if the activity had never commenced.
And when it's a retrospective application, am I correct? There's 3 times the fees for retrospective applications?
Through Madam Mayor, there is a penalty fee imposed for applications made for planning approval where the use or development's already commenced. So there is a penalty fee intended to be more expensive to dissuade people from simply undertaking the activity and then applying if and when they get found out.
And so, just a clarification, because it's quite confusing or conflicting advice. The report talks about historical fire breaks and the cleared areas. DUA's advice seems to be based on only the cleared existing fire breaks, not the historical fire breaks. And then the recommendation is only on the fire breaks. So the historical fire breaks, is that included if this motion got passed?
Through Madam Mayor, if you look at the recommendation, if you look at the condition in relation to it's condition
10.
Condition 3, excavation activity is to occur only within the existing fire breaks areas as depicted on the attached site plan. Now, what the attached site plan references, it shows fire breaks and dimensions. It doesn't articulate existing or historical. But that is the extent. With that condition, it references that plan, so all those depicted areas of fire breaks with dimensions, it allows clearing within that. But yes, Councillor Bowman's observation I agree with. The nature of how the information has been presented in the applicant's report, it does appear to be inconsistent in its reference to fire breaks.
Next question then, on page 76, which we've got the areas where it's going to come from, and we heard just from the deputation there 3.5 metre wide fire breaks, but if I was to look at some of those areas, especially in that northern corner, with the scale provided, it looks like it's at least 20 metres wide. Is that correct, or my ruler out of whack?
Through Madam Mayor, what I would say that's relevant here for us is that the condition that I just articulated references the site plan. The site plan has the fire breaks and it has the dimensions of the fire breaks. So that is what we're approving for clearance, not anything else that's on the Kaiterra Environmental Plan. It's important to note, any of the information depicted in the Kaiterra Environmental Plan, to the extent it departs from the site plan or the applicant's planning material, we prefer the site plan here. So I would respectfully not pay too much heed to the Kaiterra Environmental Report with respect to the extent of the clearing. The extent of the clearing is referenced in condition 3 to that site plan, which shows the dimensions, articulates the fire breaks and the dimensions of those, and that's what we're that's what the excavation activity and therein the clearing is limited to.
So my follow-up question is there concern from staff that what's in the site plan and what was provided in the report from the applicant appear to be significantly different in that, in looking at the site plan, we're looking at 4.5 metre wide fire breaks, we'll call them fire breaks, yet in the report from Kaiterra, they're at least 20 metres wide. And do we have concerns the intention of the applicant is to go 20 metres wide?
I would say, Madam Mayor, that referencing the condition, those are the fire breaks, the dimensions, that's what the approval is limited to. If the fire breaks, the existing fire breaks are wider than that and the proponent wishes to utilise that, then the proponent may have a problem in terms of the constraints of the application that their consultant has submitted. So I see the point Councillor Bowman is making. This highlights the need, as I often say, for precision in what information is submitted, particularly when we're drafting conditions. So we have a condition here that's deliberately restrictive on the proponent. If they have a problem with that, then they might be in a position to advise you. If they're happy to live by that limited extraction, then they can advise that. But that's what this recommendation is saying, not a broader area for clearing.
And final question, for our compliance team, if we were to get a complaint later on, does that site plan provide enough data and specific locations that they'll be able to determine exactly where the 4.5 metre wide fire break is on that block? or can they go a couple of metres this way, a couple of metres that way, which automatically then becomes 7 or 8 metres? Because it doesn't look that detailed, a site plan.
Through Madam Mayor, certainly it's not a site plan that is referencing as being based on a site survey. A drafting company has done this up. If you wanted to have centimetre perfect precision in defining how much that they can clear, then you would probably need to go away and get quite an extensive survey. I hear the point that's being made. It is true. It is not uncommon with applicants that this is the types of plans that that are acceptable. If you wanted to go to a survey level, you'd be looking at substantially far more detailed and expensive planning applications, particularly if you're dealing with matters such as this on larger lots. But yes.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. I've got a question from Councillor Henderson to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. The report refers to the impact on Wren Road would be relatively insignificant. However, given that we're talking about large trucks here, we're talking about school buses on the road, we're talking about other transport vehicles on this road in parts which are narrow, well, effectively a rural road, and some bends which are effectively blind. Have we received any complaints or concerns from residents about Wren Road and the potential dangers of heavy transport on Wren Road?
Mr. Russell, Mr. van der Linden.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In short, yes. I think the Progress Association and many other residents raised their concerns or contentions that Wren Road wasn't a sufficient standard to accommodate trucks. So yes, that was raised as a matter.
Thank you. I guess the follow-up to that is that should we give an approval and there are concerns or issues or even accidents, we hope not, would the city be in a position where we might have to do widening of Wren Road?
Mr. Russell.
Through Madam Mayor, the city staff was satisfied that the entry point into this property from Wren Road can accommodate, as of right, or length vehicles, 19 metres or less. So the question as to the overall functionality and adequacy of the existing Wren Road environment might be a matter subject of some further review. Certainly, from recollection, Wren Road has some soft shoulders, so the sealed carriageways a certain width, and then you have soft shoulders either side of that commonly we may well see, and I know the last time I was up there, you tend to hang left as larger vehicles are approaching the other side of the road. That's not uncommon in these rural areas. The question ultimately, if we go back and look at it and say, well, what width carriageway should all our roads be uniformly? As many of you will know, there are probably many rural roads in Swan that may not be up to the current standards in terms of width and the rest of that. And that's a management approach around all of that. But we're satisfied with what this application is proposing, which is only a very small number of as-of-right truck movements. We've got to remember, as-of-right means you're legally allowed to use that road, and we're not able to prevent the use of the road by such vehicles. We're satisfied that whatever, and we've certainly satisfied that the sight lines, which was an issue raised by residents, the sight lines have been adequately demonstrated as sufficient. But, and based on the numbers there, we're comfortable enough that this application doesn't present an inordinate risk of any sort in relation to the road environment.
Thank you, Mr. Russell. Further question, Councillor?
One last question, if I may. Thank you. Sorry. That's understood about the sidelines. That's in the report. The other issue I'd like to raise is what mechanism or how would we enforce a 30k per hour speed limit on a private property?
Through Madam Mayor, that is a very good question that Councillor Henderson flagged with us. I would have to give that some thought as to whether or not it's a management approach. I would imagine we can do it. In the ordinary sense, you're not subject to the rules of the road on vehicles within private property. But in this instance here, we're not regulating it under the Road Traffic Act, we're regulating it under the Planning and Development Act. I think, even though it seems counterintuitive that you could impose such a restriction, I believe that we could.
Any further questions, Councillor Henderson? You're all right. Councillor Catalano, question to
Oh,
staff?
yes, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that the site plan that Councillor Bowman was referring to is the one on page 104, where, and all it does is basically show in a blue shaded area some fire breaks, and that's all there is. That's the level of detail that we're making this decision on, correct? Can I have that confirmation? Because I might have missed something.
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, that's not correct. The site plan is the plan on page 48, which is the black and white diagram, in my words, which has got a City of Swan received stamp on 19th of December 2022. I think Councillor Catalano is referring to plans depicted in the Coterra Environmental Report. That is not the site plan.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. So I did see this one, and it's very hard to read actually, and that's probably why I didn't take a lot of notice of it. So can you just explain what it means? Because there's no legend on it or anything. So where is this? What is actually going to be happening on this black and white map, and what's the sort of little kind of curly lines mean, and where's the excavation area on this map?
Through you, Madam Mayor, so I accept what's being said here. To understand the extent of what's being proposed, you'll need to reference the written application document, which we've taken the liberty in the report of expounding on, in relation to the description of what the proposal is, then referencing that with respect to what this site plan shows, which is effectively, as I indicated previously, the areas of natural bushland, the various fire breaks and their dimensions, width and length, the existing dirt clearing area, existing sheds and tanks, and then critically, with relevance to understanding the application, two depictions, diagrammatic depictions, one of which is the laydown area, which is a notated circle to the middle of that the property on that site plan, and the gravel stockpile area. So when we understand their excavation activities, we're saying they're excavating those fire breaks depicted on this, and they're utilising the laydown area and the gravel stockpile area as part of the crushing activities.
Okay, it's just not clear at all from this map. That it doesn't at all illustrate what you just said, and I can't even see it right now, even after you've said it on this map. I mean, it needs to have a shaded area. This map needs to have a shaded area to indicate what we're talking about. And just in terms of their report, I can't even rely on their report, because in their report they say that the excavation involves the historical fire breaks and cleared areas to be ripped by the 40-tonne excavator. So there's cleared areas in this map that could be referred to it, even though the conditions say it's got to be fire breaks. What the hell is a fire break in terms of this map, which is what I think Councillor Bowman was referring to. There needs to be far more detail before this can actually be properly assessed. Thank you.
Any further questions from councillors to staff? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you those who have given a deputation tonight. We also received some written deputations. The first from Ian Standard, not in support of the officer's recommendation. The second from Sally Block, not in support of the officer's recommendation. The third from Kerry Best, not in support of the officer's recommendation. The fourth, Nicole and Bill Denon, not in support of the officer's recommendation. Then we move on to 14.3.2, proposed scheme and amendment number 214 to the local planning scheme number 17 to add transport depot as an additional use on lot 812, number 55 Vale Road, Hazelmere. And we have a written deputation, one from Planning Solutions, not in support of the officer's recommendation. And 16.3, release of confidential reports, Paradise Keys Aged Care Facility. We have an in-person deputation tonight from Viola Maripoda. Hi, Viola. And you have 3 minutes, and I'll give you 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Firstly, I'd like to congratulate our new Mayor and Deputy Mayor and our newly elected councillors and returning councillors. My deputation is in respect to the agenda item 16.3, release of confidential reports, Paradise Keys. Without having the benefit of knowing the full staff recommendations, I ask councillors to decide in favour of releasing as many of the reports as possible to the public. This would be in line with the city's stated shared value of open and transparent decision making. As an example, at its meeting of 23 September 2009, Council resolved to initiate the process to purchase the northern portion of Public Recreation Reserve 44267 for the purpose of developing an aged care facilities at Paradise Keys. The southern portion of the reserve, which is a registered Aboriginal heritage site, was subsequently also purchased, even though it was not included in the public consultation. When I questioned how the city acquired the additional land, the answer I was given was, because of the complexities, it is confidential. We would like to know how the additional land was purchased and what consideration was given to the likely Aboriginal heritage constraints on the development. There would be other examples where the release of previous confidential reports would help the community better understand the reasons behind decisions that have been made regarding Paradise. I'm nearly finished. All right? One sentence. Paradise Keys, where the objective of maximising transparency far outweighs any perceived risk to the city. In deciding on item 16.3, I would ask councillors to release as many of the reports as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Now, are there any questions from councillors to Viola? Any questions to staff? No? Thank you very much to those in the gallery and those who gave deputations to the staff. Thank you for coming along tonight. And this brings us to 6.3, councillor questions in regard to other items. Do councillors have any questions? Councillor Bowman?
Regarding 14.2, can I ask staff just to explain a little bit more how the 7,500 is determined? Obviously, the 15 times, is this a set amount for all local governments? And more particularly the 500 metres square. Is this the land cost, the cost of the land and parking bays, or how does it work, for example, a multi-storey car park? There's a couple of questions to start with on that one.
Mr van der Linde?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In the first instance, in Ellenbrook, there is no deck parking proposed, so the 500 square metres, the $500 per square metre is a cost for at-grade parking, and it's a nominal amount. It doesn't cover the full cost of parking. And you would also see that the policy also doesn't only allow for the provision of parking, but also for other facilities, transport-related facilities. And when the officers determined that amount, they benchmarked it against what other councils also do, because if you the guidance is provided by the state government in this regard. So to be consistent with what other councils are doing as well. So it's a nominal amount. It's not a specific detailed amount. Parking bays would be in some instances more expensive than that.
So page 35, 4.2, revision to reasonable estimates of costs. What would be the process to change the dollar figure? Is it a simple council resolution, then gazettal, or is it more complicated than that?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, again. Under the financial details in the report, let me just find it quickly. So the purpose of the report tonight is just for council to provide support to have it advertised. And at that amount, when the report comes back to council, there will be a resolution or a recommendation that council then resolve to accept the $500 per square metre, and that will then be included in the fees and charges in the next financial year. And then the revision of the cost will be done at the end of each of the financial year, and how it will be done, it will be determined through the cost. So you can use CPI or the cost of construction guidance by the state government at that stage. But that would be done every year as part of the budget.
So every year we may increase it, and then we just got to put it in the government gazette, or is there any other steps involved?
So it will be done as part of the fees and charges, and that is then, once that is approved by council, that is advertised in accordance with the Local Government Act.
5.3 talks about ancillary or incidental purposes. How do any of those dot points address parking shortfall? And some of them is provide shade trees. That would probably reduce parking. Provision of street furniture. Can park my bottom on it, but it can't park a car on it.
Madam Chair, again through you. So it is important to note that the WIPC has released guidelines in regards to the cash in lieu for parking. In the past, the planning regulations were not that specific or clear on what that money can be used for. What government has done through the guidance that I've provided is to clarify that cash in lieu for parking may be used for other purposes as well. So, for instance, within a centre where you've got public parking and you want to enhance the parking and the movement within that area to support pedestrian movement, and the tree planting in that regard is providing shade to the pedestrians that are using the footpath. So you'll see that footpaths are allowed to be paid for it as well, as is parking meters, parking signage, paint alignment and so on. So the shading of the trees to create a better pedestrian environment within that area.
But doesn't improve parking. Which
Well,
this
it
is a parking
supports-
plan.
Well, but there's a shortfall of parking, so you want to enhance the total environment within that CBD, and there is specific guidance by government that you could include it there.
And 6.2, the triggers for payment to be made, are they going to be automatic? So if we get an application in front of us and it's 10 parking bays short, will it automatically be a recommendation with a condition that the applicant pays cash in lieu 10 times 7,500? The second part of that question is, if it's a parking shortfall, is it based on the scheme figures or what staff think is reasonable? And a good example of that, what was reasonable, was the daycare at South Guildford. The scheme said one thing, staff said another thing. Because if I'm right, I was aghast when I looked at the childcare at the Spud Shed complex, which, Madam Mayor, if you remember, you and me were the only ones that voted against that. I believe that was 72 parking bay shortfall, and that would have been $540,000. So a couple of questions there about the triggers for payment.
Madam Chair, again through you. So when a development application comes to council, it will be assessed on its merit, and depending on the type of application, in some instances there will be a parking management plan submitted, there will be a transport traffic survey that will support that application. And the application will address the scheme requirements for parking, but then weighed up against what the submission was from the traffic study that was submitted through that application. The application of this policy will apply the number of parking bays that will be determined as the shortfall will be determined by the council's resolution on the application after they've assessed it on merit.
But the question was, would staff, in reports when there's a parking shortfall based on the scheme requirements for any application in this precinct, will a recommendation include that cash in lieu parking payment be required? If it's 10 parking bays short times 7,500, will that automatically be a condition?
Again, to refer to my previous answer, the officers will assess the application based on all the information provided and will make a recommendation in that regard. That recommendation could include the full number of shortfall bays as per the parking requirements under the scheme.
And to provide parking in the Ellenbrook precinct, do we own any land that we can actually put this parking on? And is that part of the strategy there as well, or are we just having the plan to take the money?
Within the Ellenbrook town centre, the public parking areas have mostly been constructed already. It's mainly in those areas behind the swim school. There's some parking areas there with smaller lots adjacent to it. But then this plan will be accompanied by a parking management plan that will go out for public consultation at the same time as this plan. And that will be shared with councillors also at the next ward meeting. That plan identifies the areas of public parking that will benefit from this process. Also remembering that in the first instance you want developers to provide a parking on site, and where they can't, you then start looking at this. So the public parking areas have mainly been constructed, and then there's obviously parking within the street reserve, on the road reserves, on the side parking in the road reserves, that can be managed through this process where parking meters can be installed, time limits can be put on it with signage that goes along that. So I think it's important to realise that we're putting a mechanism in place to be able to charge parking, a cash in lieu for parking. But in the first instance, you wouldn't want to do that if it's not necessary.
So can I get this right then? We haven't got land to put it on except for the road reserve. If an applicant puts an application in and they're 20 parking bays short, we can take the money, but we're not going to provide potentially any extra parking, but it's a mechanism to then, they get their application through, tick, we have further parking problems. To rectify that, we'll actually impose paid parking on other people. Is that what I'm hearing just then? Because that's what it sounded like.
Madam Chair, I think in that scenario you wouldn't support the application. So this is in the instance where there's a shortfall of parking that has been identified through an application that you can accommodate in some way. Some ways of accommodating the shortfall of parking could be that there could be shared parking arrangements between neighbouring properties. So it's very difficult to answer your question without the detail of an application in front of you. But if you've got a scenario where you've got 100 bays shortfall and you've got nowhere to provide that parking, you're probably not going to support the application.
So, example then, and great to go back in time, the Spud Shed one, where it was 72 short, that's in the precinct area, although staff recommended approval. If we then took cash in lieu, which is 540,000, hence the reason I was so aghast when I looked at the figure and worked it out, we'd get 540,000. We can't then we're not buying land to build more parking spots to fix that problem. We potentially will spend $540,000 we've collected to put time paid parking in. Am I missing something here? Because it doesn't seem like we're providing the extra parking. We're just reducing the amount of times people can park in the area.
Madam Chair, to refer to that example, that application wasn't supported on the basis that there will be a shortfall of parking. The application was justified through a report from an engineer that showed that there was enough parking on site as it is. And on that basis, the council provided dispensation on the parking requirements. So the intent of this is definitely not to just purely say if there's a shortfall of parking, you take their money. You'll have to assess the application on its merits and then get to the point where cash in lieu can be one of the instruments that you can use to facilitate a shortfall.
I've got questions on other items, but happy to go to others first.
Okay, we've got a question from Councillor Catalano to staff next, and then Councillor Henderson, and then Oliver. Oh, hang on. So we'll go with Councillor Catalano first. Yeah, thanks. Councillor Howlett to staff.
Thank you, Mayor. My question relates to item 14.1.1, which is the public art report. It relates to the clause that we're adding, which is 6.2, the criteria to deal with heritage. Could I please ask to have it explained to me what it means by a heritage listed place or area, if I could get an example of what a heritage listed place is, and whether that's state heritage listed or if that's local heritage listed.
Thank you. Mr. Russell or Mr. van der Linden?
Through Madam Mayor, the answer to the question is a heritage place. It will be a heritage place designated under our scheme. So that could be an area such as Guildford, which of course, as you know, is also on the State Register of Heritage Places, or it could be an individually listed property on our heritage list.
Thank you. So that would mean any of the heritage listed buildings on the municipal inventory of, is that correct?
No. The buildings that exist on the municipal inventory are not at the standard of elevation as to properties on there. So when we're talking about this, it's properties on the heritage list, the higher order properties.
Okay, so just to be clear, you said Guildford, and is there another heritage listed place or area that you could identify for me, please?
Yes. Well, so what we're talking about there is Category 1 listed places of conservation. So they're the highest order ones that exist on our heritage list. Quite often, in fact almost universally, if it's a Category 1 building on our heritage list, there's probably every chance it's on the State Register of Heritage Places as well. So, so the Guildford Hotel, for example, that site, that is on our heritage list. It's on the State Register as an individual listing, and it's also part of the Heritage Town, which is also on the State Register. If I use using that as an example because it's one that crosses over all three.
Thank you. And so, for example, then, it goes on to say that art should be generally the development approval so that heritage is considered early in the planning stages. Can you elaborate on what that statement means?
Through Madam Mayor, yes. So if you've got a development application and you're proposing a building, for example, or you're looking at additions to a building, and say it happens to be a building on the heritage list, it's desirable for the applicant to think about, in the context of a heritage building, if they're going to be, for example, fulfilling their contribution liability by electing to put the art on site. In the instance of a building, generally you'll think of two forms in which the art might present itself. It could be a standalone sculpture that sits to the front of the building or the side, separate to the building and within the curtilage of the building, or the developer may choose to put the art on the building, commonly in the form, for example, of a mural, which you see. So if it's a building with on the state register or on our heritage list, one and the same, then we're considering whether the art, where we need to ensure that the art does not detract from the significance of the place. And if it's a building with very clearly articulated architectural significance, then you want a piece of art, if it either sits separate in the form of a sculpture or on the building in the form of a mural, it needs to fit in and not detract from the significance of that building. So having the developer think carefully up front, and if they're saying, I want to put it on, I want to do a mural, then ideally what this is saying is that you give some thought to the type of mural, what it's going to be, and how it will relate to that building in the formulation of your art concept early in the piece. And particularly if it's on the state register of heritage places, then the Heritage Council of Western Australia has to be satisfied that we're not facilitating something which they might feel in terms of an art concept is contrary to the heritage significance of that place. So having that done up front is the clear intent here.
Thank you. So could I use perhaps Tui Garden as an example of, is that a heritage place, would you think, for Midland? Because as an example there, we have got art provided by the state government, which I would suggest is not complementary, so it sort of goes against what this recommendation would be. So perhaps we could retrospectively apply that to Tui Garden, I wonder.
Mr. van der Linde or Mr. Russell?
Mr. van der Linde's putting out to me a couple of things. One, Tui Gardens isn't listed, so it's a moot point. Secondly, even if it was, and the state government's put the art in there, we're not going to be able to apply anything policy-wise retrospectively to them, no.
Thank you.
Next, Councillor Catalano.
Yeah, just getting back to the Ellenbrook Build parking plan. Is this the first one that you've put together for Ellenbrook, is it?
Through Madam Chair. Now, Ellenbrook had a parking plan previously. It was prepared as part of the structure planning, master planning for Ellenbrook. They had a parking strategy, and we've accepted parking or cash in lieu for parking in some instances. And that was dealt with at the time when the developer, for instance, constructed certain public parking areas, and that money was then collected from developers as they develop, and it was offset against the work that LWP did. So that was always in place. But as the report states, in 2019, which was part of the planning reform, the state government initiated a process where they wanted to get all local governments to deal with it in the same way. And it is as a result of those new regulations that are put in place that we are required to prepare a cash in lieu parking plan for an area if we wish to take cash in lieu in future. So in this instance, we're putting something in place just to have the heads of power to be able to do it if we so wish in future.
How does this one differ from the one that already exists in broad terms? Because, I mean, there's no comparison here in the report to know if what we're going for is something better than what we've already got. I mean, apart from the fact that the state government, but I mean, obviously, we have an opportunity to not approve, not endorse this, so we could stick with the old plan, couldn't we?
No, we can't stick to the old plan. That is all lapsed. The regulations require to do a new plan. So the principles of this plan is very similar to the principles in the old plan. The only thing that I can't answer you without having to go back and look at it is the actual cost of the contribution per bay. But that I'll be able to go and have a look at and come back to you on.
And the other thing is, you know, there's just not enough information about how the money that is collected is actually used by the city to you know, provide parking for people in Ellenbrook. And I mean, you know, the other thing I found quite difficult to actually assess this plan is because we don't have a management plan, we don't have a parking plan that goes alongside it for Ellenbrook. So I don't even know if this is actually what is the plan for Ellenbrook's parking. You know, how are we going to meet the parking needs of Ellenbrook? What we've got here is a way to take money off shortfalls in parking, but that's not the point. The point is, how are we going to deal with parking issues?
Okay,
in
Councillor
Ellenbrook?
Catalano, we'll just see if Mr van der Linde would like to answer that last section.
Madam Mayor, yes, there's two questions mainly in that. In how we're using the money is determined by the regulations, and it's contained within this plan. So when the plan is endorsed by council, it determines specifically that the money you take in that area will have to be spent on parking within that area, and the money is to be kept in a reserve. That reserve fund is already in existence for Ellenbrook. Then with regards to the plan, you're quite right. You need a parking management plan. That is a separate issue which is not the subject of the report in front of you. The subject of the report in front of you is purely to create that mechanism to take the money. I think we need to be clear on that. The parking management plan has been prepared, and that is an operational plan that will also go out to the businesses within this area. And the intent is to have that public consultation done at the same time as this plan goes out to the public. And the ward councillors have been informed of the details of it in a previous discussion, but it will also be shared with them at the next ward meeting, which will be within the consultation period. So the operational plan exists, and it will be shared with the businesses in the area. But that won't impact this plan. This plan is purely just the mechanism to be able to take the money.
Okay, Councillor Henderson.
Thank you. In a similar vein where Councillor Bowman was heading, in regard to the cash in lieu, and I believe the money's got to be used for the purpose to provide parking. If there's nowhere within the immediate zone, and I imagine that's what the purpose would be rather than somewhere else in Ellenbrook or Aveley or wherever, if we can't spend that money, then what happens with that money? Does it end up going back to the people that we took it off? So it would seem there's no land to be able to put this on, or to put a multi-storey deck on or the like. So I'm wondering if this is sort of like a catch-22.
See if Mr van der Linde can enlighten us with a bit more information there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the money needs to be spent within the area, you're quite correct, and the planning regulations determine that the plan's got a lifespan of 10 years. At the end of the 10 years, if the money is not spent, it has to be paid back to the contributor at the time, and if you can't get hold of him, you're allowed to spend that money elsewhere. But that is after 10 years. In terms of Catch-22, at the time when council will have to make a decision on a development application, and there's a recommendation to take cash in lieu, one will have to consider what you're going to do with that money, and at that time it will have to be addressed. You have to also remember that within road reserves, you've got the opportunity to create more on-street parking bays. You know, you can widen the actual asphalt area to include parking bays, and there is all the other things that you can use the money for, but you wouldn't take the money at the time when the development application come in if you don't know what you're going to use it for.
So I imagine that if we spend some of it, the original payers might get some of it back. Okay. I do have another question, if I may. On page 14, public art, my favourite subject, at the top there, it's great to see that and where possible, supporting and promoting high calibre local artists in red. That's great to see that in there. Has the city yet created a list of local artists or put out an expression of interest for local artists to have a selection, if you like, for developers to consider?
Mr van der Linde or Mr Russell?
Not formally, Madam Mayor, not formally, but certainly you might almost say naturally, the inclination is for developers to look to local artists for the simple reason that our policy, or at least formally, indicated that a piece of public art that's built on site should have a theme referencing the local place, local culture, local history, etc. So that probably tends to lend itself somewhat to local artists, and what we're finding in these proposals from developers is that they are engaging local artists. I suppose you might say, well, what is a local artist? Is it a West Australian artist? Is it a Perth-based artist? Is it an artist from this neck of the woods, so to speak? Is it a locality-based artist? So we haven't got... The policy is loose enough in that respect, but generally I suppose a local artist might mean someone that operates and is known as an artist within Western Australia and operates in that field. So it's sort of almost, through Madam Mayor, happening organically, but certainly, and I can't speak to the situation that we might deploy where we are using cash and money to engage our artists. We probably have our ordinary policies and procedures around procurement of a service that relates to. But in essence, no, we haven't got anything formal, but for the most part, and particularly with these words, it will be steering proponents towards engaging a local artist in the formulation of an art proposal.
A follow-up, if I may, Madam Chair. But perhaps this is for the CEO. Quite clearly, some of our local artists are well known and other really good ones aren't out there with a high profile. To be able to elevate those people to a point where they're recognised or able to be contracted, is there a mechanism? Do you see a mechanism to be able to seek out a list, if you like, or some way of ensuring that those local artists that might be in many different forms are able to contribute?
CEO?
Yes, through the chair. Well, the first piece would be all of this is that we actually have some policy through this that actually recognises a linkage to local artists. So one of the advantages of policy in referring to local artists is you can actually then start to define who they are. The second element would be that they're registered as a local business in the local area, as in providing art. And then we can do promotion through business and tourism, particularly on those people who are trading as artists in the city.
And we have Councillor Johnson or Deputy Mayor Johnson. Question to staff?
Yeah, thank you. Questions to Mr van der Linde relates to cash in lieu. My recollection was that when we passed the Guildford access and parking strategy, that we were told in order to have cash in lieu, we actually had to have a definite plan to provide the alternative parking. So we need to actually identify a location or have a plan to do that. So if that was the case for the Guildford access and parking strategy, why is it not the case for Ellenbrook cash in lieu?
Mr van der Linde?
Madam Chair, again, so as I've said, the guidance has been provided by state government, and it clearly allows for the funds to be used for other related components to parking as well. Now, and there is an Ellenbrook parking strategy and management plan, which is an operational plan. It sits separate from this. So all we doing through the report in front of you is to create a mechanism to be able to charge the contribution. When you want to use that mechanism in future, then you will have to then, as part of the application when it comes to council, address the matter of how that money can be used. But we do have a parking management plan for Ellenbrook that will go out to the public as well, and the details of that will then be worked through with the businesses and will be also available at the time when it comes back to council after the advertising of this plan. So it may be that you don't charge cash in lieu for the creation of new bays, but you charge a component of the cash in lieu for the upgrade of an existing parking or to enhance that area to make it a more friendly environment for the users of the area that's related to the parking.
So, question: Does that Ellenbrook parking strategy already exist? It seems to be either in the past or in the future. Is it? Where is it?
So there is an existing previous Ellenbrook parking strategy and plan that is now has to be updated in accordance with the guidance provided by the state government. The strategy and the parking management plan as operational plans have been prepared, and as we state in this report, is we will go out for public consultation on the parking management plan at the same time that we're going to advertise the parking in lieu plan.
Okay, thank you. My second question is about the provision of public art and the heritage aspect of it. So on page 18 of the agenda, page 4 of the policy, at 6.2 AC, in red, the addition there, it says the city may require that the public art is constructed as proposed or modified, or may not approve the public art proposal, or may require public art that meets this policy objectives as well as meet the legislative scheme and policy provisions relevant to the impacted heritage listing. So does that mean then it might be possible to for the applicant to say, because the impact of the public art on the heritage building would be negative, therefore I don't need to provide any money for public art?
Mr. Russell, Mr. van der Linden.
Through you, Madam Mayor, that provision is nothing more or less than what already exists in the operation of the public art policy. You can approve it or not approve it. All it's doing is reflecting the extra care and sensitivity in this process around considering a public art proposal on a heritage listed building. Conceivably, I suppose, if you had a situation where a proponent proposed public art and the public art in one form or another being proposed to be developed on the site was considered to be unacceptable in terms of its heritage impact or impact on the heritage building, then you would expect, I suppose, that to be refused or not supported. The proponent would then have to go away and try a different proposal to see whether that fitted in and so forth. I suppose worst case scenario, if it was the case that the building didn't lend itself to any form of public art, and I would find that hard to believe, but it's possible, then the proponent may end up having to accept that they pay the cash in lieu of provision of public art on site. They give us the money and we go and put it somewhere else in the locality where it's not impacting on a heritage listed building.
Okay, thank you. That's a great answer.
Just had one more first from Councillor Bowman was next, and now we've got, you'll be next, Councillor Catalano, and then Councillor Ringo next.
Mine regarding the financial statements. A couple of questions on those. The overspend of $917,000 on the District Park active building and the $781,000 overspend on the Midland Library. Did we address them previously in the previous budget review, or are they to be done later? And then just if we have been provided or if we haven't, were we going to get the reason for the overspend and what they were our percentage of the total project costs?
Thank you. We'll take that on notice.
The Swan Active Midland is showing a revenue of 3.4 million. What month is this based on it being opened? So the budget.
I think you'll find that you're looking for the future revenue for the whole year.
Yeah,
and are you referring to item? I can just a particular page.
14.5.1, and when we look at the Midland Swan Active Midland, shows you the expense, but it also shows you the revenue.
Yep.
And it's showing a revenue of 3.4 million. Obviously, when we drafted the
page
budget,
number that you're looking at.
haven't got it. Sorry, just in 14.5.1.
Page, sorry, through the chair.
Haven't got it.
Okay. Happy to take the question on notice if you want to give us the page, but provisionally when you see the facility, it is a March opening date that we're hoping for, subject to no further operational issues in terms of provision of equipment, etc. But that's the plan.
And so that was what was budgeted for, a March opening?
That's my understanding, but I'll have Ms Bishop come back and confirm that to you afterwards.
Okay. The street trees, and sorry, I haven't got the page as well. Yes, I have. I'm on page 156 and 157. So the street trees, we've only spent 47% of the budget. Would I be right in that it's normal that 50% of the budget is spent in the last quarter of the financial year, being April, May, June, when we're buying the plants?
Thanks, Mr. Coaten.
Sorry, I can't quite see the line item that you're referring to, but yeah, certainly the expenditure isn't uniform for something like that across the financial year. Plants are purchased at, so the main costs are obviously the planting, the purchase costs, and the planting costs. So I don't know if that answers your question.
It's item 7,000,055. So it's 2.294 budget. We've spent or committed as well as 1.081, which is 47%. So the question was, is this normal that 50% of the street tree budget, noting now we've got a $2.2 million street tree budget, that it would be spent in the last quarter of a financial year?
Well, the budget in that area is significantly greater than it has been in previous years, so I'm not sure that you could make an accurate comparison to previous years, but certainly a significant amount of it is spent in the winter months with planting.
Great. Let me rephrase the question then. Are we confident we're going to be able to spend a $2.294 million budget this financial year on street trees?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you. The Broadway has a full year budget of only 100,000, but year to date is 1.74 million. What's happened there, noting that there's an extra 440,000 in revenue, so I expect we've got an extra grant, but we're significantly over there, and that is item 800177. Sorry, no, yes, 800177.
Yeah, well, we did get some additional funding for that one. Yeah, I'll have to take that on notice for the details of that.
So my question then is, an overspend of $1.64 million budget, does that require council approval?
Mr. CEO.
So it does at a certain time, but as the council approves its budget, not by line item, but at a program, adjustments can occur within the program. Where individual projects then run over, as you know, Councillor Bowman, they will come back through the budget adjustment process, which is conducted 3 times a year.
And has the Broadway come back to council since we've already done one this financial year, noting that we're significantly over?
So to my knowledge, no, on the basis the first budget adjustment is to, which occurs in October, is predominantly focused on making any adjustments that came in as a result of grants or other information, principally immediately after the budget's dealt with. The Act only requires the council to do one budget adjustment a year, so the primary budget adjustment is the mid-year budget review, which is presented to council in February and either adopted in February or March.
I've got some questions, Madam Mayor, on 14.5.2. I'll submit most of them to staff, but there's a couple that were relevant to council previous decisions. 057481 is 155,000 paid to the Swan Valley Sporting Club. Just confirming, was this what council previously agreed to? I haven't gone back previous resolution, but I didn't think it was that high. I know Swan Valley's getting paid more than Swan Athletic, but I thought it was in the 120, 130 mark.
I'll ask through the CEO, and we might have to get back to you then.
It will be easier, Councillor Bowman, for you to provide those in writing to us, and we'll provide a response to you and the other elected members.
Okay. The 9,000 for Merrill dinner tags. What's a Merrill dinner tag? 058171.
That one we might have to get back to you on as well, since we don't have.
As noted, with these inquiries on individual line items when expenditure's already been made, if you send us the written inquiry, we'll provide a response to you and to all the elected members.
Okay, so 14.5.4, the annual investment strategy review. What was the cost of the report?
Individual queries that you've got, you might have to submit them. How many more questions have you got regarding the line items?
Well, I'm on to the annual investment strategy review. That's
How many more questions have you got individually on each item?
on the line items of the accounts. I've moved on from that.
Okay,
So I'm on to 14.5.4, which is a different
okay.
report.
So your question?
Was what was the cost of the report? And then my next question was, does the company provide any other services to the city? And what's the benefit of the report, considering it's fairly generic info?
Mr. CEO.
Happy to take your questions on notice and provide you a response.
Okay, and the rest of my questions are confidential items.
Thank you. Councillor Ringo is next. At Councillor Ringo's hand, and you asked at the same time, but you are next after her. And then Councillor Howlett after.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just going to go back to the Ellenbrook Town Centre payment lieu, and my question is it possible to get a copy of the operational plan just so that we can have a look at the solutions?
Certainly, Madam Mayor, that it is possible, and the idea is that ward councillors will be briefed on it specifically on the 29th of November at your ward meeting, but I'm happy to circulate that plan prior to that.
Councillor Catalano.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, can I request that any responses that you give to Councillor Bowman's questions are actually also sent to me, because I'd like to see the answers to those as well, thank you. And I just wanted to go, touch on the Guildford cash and lieu parking and the Midland cash and lieu parking. So are we going to expect in future that there's going to be one of these prepared, given that there's these new guidelines? Is that what's going to happen fairly shortly?
Madam Chair, again, yes. The short answer to that is yes, it will come to you, but as you know, that in Midland and Guildford, the councillors never charged cash in lieu before. It was always been dealt with through other means. And the reason for bringing the Ellenbrook one first up was because there was a plan that entailed the taking of cash in lieu, and that was the reason to put it up first. But the intent is to put that mechanism in place for the other areas in future as well.
No problem. So we had next was Councillor Howlett.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to request that answers to all councillors' questions, for example, Councillor Bowman's and Councillor Ringo's, are sent to all councillors, if that could be arranged.
We noted that, thank you, and we'll make sure that staff get them sent out to all councillors. So next person was Councillor or Deputy Mayor, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm looking at page 151, Statement of Financial Activity, and I think this is where Councillor Bowman was referring to purchase of property, plant and equipment, and was discussing new junction land projects. And I've noticed in there it says 948k for IT equipment replacement and system upgrades, and presumably if that's a favourable variance, it means that we didn't spend 958k that we were going to spend. So the question is that because we got the IT equipment and system upgrades for less than we expected, or because we didn't do it?
Mr. CEO.
Thank you. The report refers to the timing of cash. So in other words, in terms of the sequence where we thought we would have spent the money at this particular point in time, we haven't. It doesn't mean we won't. So the IT procurement plan still remains on track, but in terms of the cash flow, it hasn't been spent at this particular time.
Okay, are there any other questions from councillors or new councillors who might want to have a practice go at asking staff any questions? No? Councillor Catalano.
Well, while we're on it, on that page 151 item, could you also put in a question, please, with an answer as to what the 3.4 million favourable variance or the 1.3 million favourable variance for New Junction is, please? because I don't know what that means, what that actually refers to. So can you? Well, it says key contributors to this 3.4 million favourable variance are 1.3 million for new junction land projects. Can you describe what that is in the email to us? Thank you.
Through the chair, we'll take that one on notice.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Are there any other further questions from councillors to staff? In a minute. Councillor Miles.
Councillor Hayden, I would just like to ask the CEO on page 151, we have some money coming in for the Marangaroo Hepburn Avenue intersection, and that's 542,000. Are we expecting any more money coming from grants for this project or not?
Mr. Coaten.
Yes, we are. That's the first 40% of the Metropolitan Regional Road Group Road Improvement Program, so there will be another 60% still to come.
Questions? No. If there's no further questions there, I need to thank everyone for attending tonight. And I hope you have. Oh, sorry.
Need to exclude the public galleries if they ask any confidential questions.
I was going to let them go by and say good night. Thank the gallery for coming in. We're now going to move to a confidential section, so we'd have to ask the gallery to move to the exit out here. And hope you have a safe trip home. And councillors will remain in the confidential section for some questions.